co-hosts, beloved listeners, welcome back to Background Noise. I am your host, Joe.
I'm Jack.
And unfortunately, Joseph cannot join us today, but we are joined by a guest host, a local expert, as we put it here on the show, Michael Rennaker.
What's up?
And today, as you may or may not have figured out from our reference, in the opening, we are going to be discussing the Jurassic Park trilogy in the lead up to the last movie in the Jurassic World. I'm assuming that the last movie in the Jurassic World trilogy. We're going to go through the Jurassic Park trilogy this week. A couple weeks later, we'll do all three Jurassic World movies. Before we get to that, a couple bits of bookkeeping notes. As we have discussed before, I am streaming on Twitch. If you want to check me out, twitch.tv/Professor Draken. I usually stream in the evenings on weekdays, Tuesdays through Friday. And I've also got a YouTube channel where right now all I'm doing is posting short versions of the stream, clips from the stream. But I might start doing other stuff. We might even start posting versions of the podcast for that as well. We've talked about that. So if the listeners think that'd be something interesting, reach out to one of us on Reddit or Instagram or however, and let us know if that would be something you'd be interested in. Do we have any other bookkeeping notes, Jack?
Not that I'm aware of.
Alrighty, then I will go ahead and start right off with, as always, our story synopsis. So, this is one of the things I really like about the trilogy is that all three of them start with the same similar premise, which is that something has gone terribly wrong on the island, and then we have to bring in experts in order to come fix it. So the first movie starts off with, first of all, I should say, for the 4 people who have not seen Jurassic Park, the whole premise of the movie is that scientists have brought dinosaurs back to life and tried to make a theme park out of it. So, for the 4 people in the world who haven't seen these movies. So the first movie starts off with they're trying to transfer some velociraptors from one pen to the other. They start to escape and they end up catching a person and eating him, obviously killing him. And then the investors say, all right, if we're going to make this an actual park, we need some experts to sign off and say this is actually a safe place to have people come in as an attraction. And so that is the reason why John Hammond, the owner and person who runs the park, brings in Dr. Ian Malcolm, Dr. Alan Grant, and Dr. Sadler as these local experts, that's our phrase, as these experts in their field to determine whether or not the park is safe. And so the first, the first act is them figuring out, oh, these people have brought dinosaurs back. And is that a good idea? Was that a good idea? Is it okay for us to be playing God by bringing back these long dead animals and then putting them in basically a zoo for us to look at? And then over the course of the second act, we get things going progressively worse. We get hurricane hits the island. We get, I think Nedry is the guy's name, is the tech guy. Nedry. Nedry sabotages things to steal embryos so he can sell them to a third party because he's been shorted on his salary. And so a combination of different things going wrong, and suddenly we have Dr. Grant and some kids stranded out in the park with all of the dinosaurs loose running around causing mayhem and people scrambling to try to get things fixed. And we have a lot of different tense climatic encounters between some of the cast and the velociraptors, or Grant and the kids getting chased by the T-Rex. And eventually this all culminates into them being able to get the park up and running enough that they can contact the mainland to call for help. And they're about to escape. They're getting chased by velociraptors. And then the T-Rex comes barging in through a wall and eats one of the velociraptors and screams triumphantly at the screen. And as the banner for Jurassic Park falls down in front of him, letting them know, the dinosaurs won this game. And then there's a little bit of closing action. Movie 2, similar idea where something goes wrong, but this is where some tourists happen to be vacationing on one of the islands that, not the actual Jurassic Park amusement park, but the Site B where they were doing all of their breeding and testing and things like that. They're vacationing on this island, and the daughter gets attacked by the little compy dinosaurs, the little baby-looking dinosaurs, which reveals to the public that, hey, Jurassic Park is still a thing. There are still these dinosaurs on an island, and they actually exist. And so John Hammond sends in a team. Well, he wants to send in a team of people to do research on them in their natural environment. One of the people he recruits is Ian Malcolm from the first movie, but he sends Ian Malcolm's girlfriend as the vanguard team. And Ian's like, well, I wasn't going to go beforehand, but now this isn't a survey mission. This is a rescue mission. We need to go save her. Which actually turns out to be somewhat incorrect. She's actually fairly safe on her own up till that point, except that InGen, the people who had sponsored like the creation of Jurassic Park, want to go in and take a bunch of the animals and do tests on them, and they cause a bunch of problems, and the team of characters that we care about cause problems for InGen, which causes problems for everyone, and we get a baby T-Rex gets injured, and a bunch of people get killed because of the T-Rex parents coming to save the baby. And we get treks through the forest and through the grasslands where people are getting picked off by dinosaurs left and right until we go from a big cast of 30 extras to like the 5 or 6 characters that we actually care about over the course of a few scenes of people getting massacred. But eventually they're able to get off the island safely at about the point where you think the movie should end. And then we discover that InGen did successfully take a T-Rex with them back to San Diego, where it eats all the members of the crew on the ship that it's on, escapes into the city, and then they have to figure out how to get it back onto the ship and send it back to the island. And then the third movie, again, we start off with, this time we start off with some people being very stupid and taking a boat way too close to the island they know has dinosaurs on it. And they try to paraglide, parasail, hang glide, I can't remember exactly what they're doing, but they're flying behind the boat, and the boat crashes, and they go flying off onto the island, and now it's a rescue mission to get them back. And Dr. Alan Grant is brought in as the expert. He's tricked into being brought onto the island by the concerned parents who are like, oh, well, we'll pay for funding for your dinosaur dig expedition. Except they're actually just a couple of random Midwestern middle-class individuals who don't have that kind of money. And then they get everyone, they end up crashing they land safely on the island. The plane gets destroyed by a dinosaur, and then they end up getting stranded and having to find their way back. Again, fighting through the jungle and getting through dinosaurs, and there's all of the extras getting murdered by dinosaurs, and all of the people that we actually care about not getting murdered by dinosaurs. And it kind of gets a little bit formulaic by that point, but we'll get to that. First, before we get into discussing the 3 movies, I have a little bit of a Jurassic Park trivia. So, start off with first I want to talk about the book. Which, if you guys don't know, Jurassic Park is based on a book. So this first question should be a gimme, but who was the author of the Jurassic Park book? We have Douglas Adams, Michael Crichton, Brandon Sanderson, or H.G. Wells.
That would be Michael Crichton.
Okay, good.
Yep.
I mean, we can have this as a competition between the two of you, or we can have this as a competition between the two of you against me. So I don't know if you guys want to team up and try to figure out the answers to the questions.
I like the idea of us taking you on.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Fair enough. All right. Okay. So yeah, Michael Crichton, famous late 20th century sci-fi author. He wrote some other books, but I'd say most of what he's famous for is his very excellent science fiction, very like realistic, grounded science fiction, as realistic as it can be for the amount of knowledge he had about science at the time. So in that strain, which of these 4 is not a Michael Crichton book? The Lost World, Prey, The Andromeda Strain, or The Left Hand of Darkness?
Left Hand of Darkness.
That was going to be my guess. D.
Okay. Yep. I think Andromeda Strain is one of his first books, one of the very early ones, which is about a spaceship goes up into space, obviously, and it crashes back down, and it's brought an alien virus with it that starts like absolutely eviscerating a small town. Prey is, I believe, Prey is about a swarm of nanobots escapes from a lab and starts killing people. Because like us basically becomes like a super intelligent hive mind thing is kind of how I understood it, killing a bunch of people. And then Lost World is just Jurassic Park 2. Lost World is based less, I think it's a less of a direct one-to-one, but it is based on Lost World, which is an actual sequel to the first Jurassic Park. And then The Left Hand of Darkness sounds kind of like a Michael Crichton title, but it is by an author named Ursula Le Guin, so it's a different sci-fi author. All right, so now actual trivia about the movie itself. So there are many quotable lines, especially in the first movie. One of them is I can't remember which paleontologist says it to the other. I can't remember if it's Grant or Sadler that says, "I think we're extinct." But where does that line originally come from? Is that actually an original line from in the books? Is it a line from the special effects team that they decided to incorporate into the movie? A line from the sound design team? Or a line from the film production team?
This would just be me guessing. What do you got, Michael?
So I believe that was a line from somebody on the special effects team, specifically the guy that they had originally hired to do stop motion animation for the film before they had decided to do computer generated imagery. And upon test reel of the CGI T-Rex, he was like, "Looks like I'm extinct," because obviously stop motion was not really a thing after Jurassic Park came out.
Yep, that is exactly correct. It was Tippett to Spielberg when he saw the first test run of the CGI. Like it was just the skeletons of the dinosaurs, not the actual like fleshed out versions. But still, like it was so realistic. They said, "Yep, I guess we're extinct," or "I think we're extinct." So next, obviously, the first movie is called Jurassic Park, but dinosaurs actually only make up a fraction of the actual on-screen time. So about what proportion of the movie are dinosaurs on screen during the first movie? About 5 minutes or 4%, 10 minutes or about 7 to 8%, 15 minutes or 11%, or 20 minutes or 15%.
Oh,
I would go with C.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I know it's really low, but I don't think it's quite as low as just 5 minutes. I think it's
Yep.
closer to 15.
15 minutes. 9 minutes is animatronics, and 6 minutes is completely just CGI. And the last, we got a little bit of a dinosaur trivia question. So the velociraptors in the movie are about 6 feet tall in the movie, which is actually, there's a real life dinosaur called Utah raptor, which is about 6 feet tall. How big were real velociraptors? About half a foot, 6 inches, about 2 feet, about 4 feet tall, or about 10 feet tall?
It's either 2 or 4. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that'd be my guess. 2.
2. All right,
Sure,
final
we'll go
answer.
2.
All right, yes, it is 2. They are just slightly shorter than 2 feet. They are real life velociraptors were about the size of a turkey, which significantly less terrifying than the animals that we saw on screen. Although another interesting bit of trivia, like they made the velociraptors about 6 feet tall, and then after the movie was made, paleontologists discovered Utahraptor, which is that height, which is about the same size as the ones they made on the screen. And I think it was Spielberg, but I can't remember who. One of them said, "We created the monsters and then we discovered them in real life," which is just kind of funny. All right, so now we got the trivia out of the way. Now we can jump into the real meat of the conversation. So we'll start off. We're going to go through these movies in order. So we're going to start off with the first Jurassic Park. So, what are your guys' thoughts on the first of the 3 movies?
Well, in my mind, the first 2 are the only ones that really count.
Okay.
And the first one to me just stands head and shoulders above the rest. Part of that's probably because when I was really young, it's what my parents put on the TV to keep me occupied. when they needed to do other things like clean the house or do their jobs. So I just watched it a lot and really liked it. But besides the fact that it kind of revolutionized filmmaking, I think it's just a really entertaining movie, especially for the audiences all the way back when it came out, and the fact that it still stands up today from like a computer generated imagery standpoint is pretty incredible.
How old were you when you? Do you remember how old you were around the time you first watched it?
I want to say like 5 years old. Pretty
And
young.
that didn't have like a negative impact on you at all, you don't think?
Um, I guess not that I've noticed.
Starts twitching, starts spasming in the corner.
I mean, I do sometimes wonder what kind of room I would have in my brain if I didn't have almost all the dialogue to the whole movie memorized. But
Sure.
I can't quote it on the spot. But as I'm watching the movie and it's like causing me to remember, I can pretty much line for line say the whole thing.
Nice. Yeah, I just know from what I've heard, a lot of people at the time were skeptical about taking their kids to see it. I know parents wanted to take their kids because there were kids in the movie, so they thought it would be a safe choice. But then, like reviewers and stuff after going into it were like, yeah, kids younger than 10 shouldn't be seeing this movie. It's pretty intense. So glad to see you made it through okay.
I mean, it is a monster movie, right? It is. It's. I wouldn't know. I called it a horror movie in our show notes, but it's more of a thriller than an actual horror movie. No, it's a thriller action movie, and it definitely falls into the category of a monster movie, right? I kind of thought about how this is the thing that Michael Crichton did very well, which is that he took the ideas of monsters and found ways to make them realistic for our modern world, for our modern science-based world where we don't believe that fairies live in the forest. We don't believe that if you go out at night, a werewolf is going to kill you or a vampire is going to bite you. At least, I don't know about you guys. I don't carry around garlic and silver bullets on the assumption that werewolves and vampires aren't going to kill me. You guys can do whatever you want in your lives. But like the idea that we could take DNA from dinosaurs and bring them back and make them real, like make them come to life, is a believable monster movie. I think, at least in my opinion. So
yeah.
which I appreciate that, bringing, but the flip side of that is, of course, it is a monster movie. We get, I don't think we actually, because it's, what's the rating? Is the rating PG-13? It's not. I know it's not R because we don't actually see anyone. We don't actually see anyone get murdered on screen. We always see. They're very creative, right? You see the person like falls down, and the velociraptors are grabbing his leg and pulling him into the pin, and you see him disappearing into the pin, but you don't actually see him. Or Sam Jackson's character, not the tech guy, the other. I can't remember what role he is playing in the park team.
He's some other tech guy, I guess.
Yeah, he's like the secondary tech guy. Like he dies off screen, and then you see his arm fall on Dr. Sadler. Right, it's like in a jump scare kind of moment. So they're very. I don't know. I don't. At the time, it probably was too much for kids under 10, but now I think it might be too tame for young kids compared to some of the stuff we see today.
Yeah, I think compared to especially other movies at the time, not that maybe the concepts weren't as scary, but because they looked so bad, versus this really felt like it could be real and really be happening. Yeah. So I think it probably at that time, 1993 when it came out, it probably was intense. I wouldn't have seen it until the early 2000s because I wasn't born until 1997. So by then, I think maybe it had tamed off a little bit. But
yeah, fair. I mean, didn't it come out 97? Didn't the first one?
No, that was 93.
It was 93.
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
I think Lost World was 97.
Yep.
Oh, that's what I'm remembering. Yeah, it was 93, 97, and then 2001 is because there were 4-year increments.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I was off by a factor there.
I think, you had mentioned one of the trivia questions, like they were only on for 15 minutes in the first film. I really think that was to the film's benefit, because
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of great films where the villain, I don't even know where I was going with that. A lot of great films, you don't see the villain very much. Like Darth Vader, he's only on screen in New Hope for like 10 minutes. Alien, in the first Alien film, I think is only like for 5 minutes. All these like big monsters or villains, when done well, are usually only on screen for a short period of time, because that makes them more terrifying. The anticipation of the villain versus them actually being on screen. And so I think that worked very well for this film. I think that's something that as the sequels go on, they think, oh, we should push for dinosaurs more and more, put them in, and, you know, the more dinosaurs are in here, the better it's going to be. But yeah, not so much. And I think they sort of missed the point.
Yep.
Especially in the first one, you never lose feeling the presence of the dinosaurs. You know, there's always like a shadow here, or
Yeah.
a sound here and there, or the cup of water vibrating on the car dashboard. You always feel their presence, but they didn't actually have to have them on screen, versus
Right.
the new trilogy where they're like, we need more teeth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the irony, right? We'll talk about this. I'm sure we'll talk about this when we talk about the new trilogy, but like, they do at least acknowledge the fact that there is that shift in audiences. They're almost a meta commentary on itself. Like at the time in 1993, having the cup of water shake and having, like, you hear the Tyrannosaur scream and you know it's coming, but you haven't actually seen it yet. That works better than just having, because if you're just going to have the monsters on screen all the time, you need them to have more teeth. You need them to have more spikes and more scales and more tail weapons and more, you know, you have to make them bigger and more impressive, because if you can always see them, they're not as scary, and you have to keep making them more scary, which having them doing these clever tricks of, you know, they're there and there's never a point where you forget that you're in Jurassic Park, but you don't get to just look at them endlessly. Yeah. And then
Right.
because of doing that, you have more time to spend on important things. Like I don't think that you could do this in a modern movie, but there are at least 2 different like philosophy discussions in this movie. We have the dinner scene. We have the dinner scene, and we have the ice cream scene, where we have all of the scientists and the lawyer and John Hammond sitting around the table talking about, was this a good idea or not? Should we actually have done this? And then we have the aftermath scene where Dr. Sadler and Hammond, is just those 2 talking, and they're saying, yeah, this was probably a bad idea.
Right.
We probably shouldn't have done this. And like, we don't get those in modern movies. It has to be more teeth. It has to be more screaming. And you miss the, like, this is the message of the movie. That is the point of this movie. The point of this movie is, you were so busy trying to figure out if you could, you didn't stop to think if you should.
Well, and that's the whole really theme of this franchise, right?
Yeah. Right. In multiple ways.
So, but yeah, you'd already mentioned some philosophy discussions. Just the characters in general, I thought were excellent in this film. Pretty much all of them were likable. Somehow even the kids were likable enough. You have in 2 and 3, the kids were fine, but in this one, they worked very well. I thought with Alan Grant, they grow to like each other and have a bit of a bond, which is very sweet. Something this film does an excellent job with is taking 2 characters with opposing viewpoints and forcing them to be challenged by those viewpoints. Because you have Alan at the start of the film. He doesn't like kids for many different reasons. And Hammond's grandchildren, they're no different. Still doesn't like them. It's only when the T-Rex attacks and Alan and the kids are split up from everyone that he learns kids aren't so bad, and he grows to like them. So that's one example. Another example is you have Hammond, who is pro-scientific advancement, sparing no expense, and is of the mindset that he could, because he should. But it's only when the T-Rex escapes and the dinosaurs start threatening his guests and grandchildren, he realizes what a terrible mistake he's made. And yeah, so it's because of the whole thing at the park happening, these people who had these specific viewpoints at the beginning of the film are their viewpoints are changed, and we definitely see a lot of growth for both of those characters. And it's very natural. I think works very well.
Yep. Yep. Like just it's one of those classic things where like neither of Grant not liking kids is probably wrong. Is probably the wrong mindset to have. Hammond isn't necessarily like he's not evil. It's not like he wanted to hurt people. He wanted to help people, right? We have a whole thing about him. He talks about the flea circus, right? I think is what he did.
Yeah.
Was his first attraction that he made, and he wanted to give them something real. The problem was he didn't understand just how dangerous real dinosaurs are. So, yeah, it's great. I wish this is one of those things. This movie feels like it's in an inflection point in the movie making industry in general, right? Because like this is the point where the special effects are good enough to make the monsters believable on screen. Like, obviously, there's a little bit of polish that still needs to be done on the CGI for the dinosaurs, and we see that in future movies. But even watching it here, what are we, 20 years later, 30 years later? The first movie the CGI still holds up. It looks amazing. So we finally reached a point where we can do this level of quality in the CGI and the special effects in making and really selling these monsters, but we haven't made the movie all about the special effects of the monsters, which is kind of where we're at now, where it's like with the modern superhero movies where it's just, okay, we have big flashy lights on screen for 2.5 hours, as opposed to having the substance of the philosophy discussion. So
yeah, I think that's my favorite thing about the first movie, especially, and a little bit the second one, is that the story is always front and center, not the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs are part of that story, and like you said, we kind of move away from that the longer we go through the first trilogy and then into the second one.
Yep. Right. Well, I think that's a good segue into the second movie, unless we have any final thoughts on the first one.
No, it's a perfect film. Go watch it if you haven't.
Yeah, that's fair. That's the recommendation. Yeah. All right. Does Lost World hold up to its predecessor?
I think so.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because they got Steven Spielberg to come back and help with that film too, and then after that he was kind of let more on the sidelines. But I think it does a good job of telling the story of Site B. It doesn't adhere to the book particularly closely, but it kind of continues that story from the first movie successfully, and I think the story is still mostly front and center there. There is a lot more going on with the dinosaurs being on screen, more CGI, but not to the extent that I really feel like it detracts from the overall experience.
Yeah, I had never seen 2 or 3 before doing it for this episode, so I was skeptical that they'd be able to find a way to bring people back to the Jurassic Park that makes sense, but I think this film actually pulled it off. So we'll get to 3 later, but at least this film I thought did pull it off well. In the words of Ian Malcolm, this film wasn't a research expedition, it's a rescue operation, and because it wasn't them doing a research expedition again, I think it worked, because I think that was a very legitimate reason for him to go back to the island.
Yep.
Despite him being very much, against going back the entire time and hating the entire experience and warning Hammond during, most of the first film, this is not going to go well. And so, and I actually really liked that we got to see Malcolm as the main character, because he's probably my favorite character in the trilogy. And so getting to see the focus on him, I thought was great.
Yeah, it's an interesting position, because there's always a concern, because he was definitely, I think Grant was the main character in the first movie, and Malcolm was more of a deuteragonist. He's not the primary character, and because he's not the primary character, every line he has is amazing, right? Everything he says, almost every line he says is memeable or quotable, and even the lines that aren't like quippy enough to be quotable are still excellently delivered. And so there's always a risk that when you take a character like that and you turn them into the main character, that there actually wasn't enough there to make them the center of attention the first time around, and so this is why we didn't do it. But I think they pulled that off excellent. I think it helps that we have an excellent actor playing him, right? So that always helps. But I think just the character also helps to carry the plot. Not that this plot needs to be carried as much as others.
Right.
We'll get there.
And I think if there was anything that I would want to see in the second one that's not already there, it's some of the backstory about like John Hammond and his company and why Ian Malcolm becomes the main character. But if you haven't read the book and you don't know that's happening, I don't think you're really missing it by just seeing the movies. But once you read the books, it's kind of like, oh man, I wish that had been part of the story, because that makes a lot of other things make way more sense. I feel like they come out of left field a little bit less.
You want to fill in some details for us?
Don't remember any specific details. I remember like the scene in the second book where Ian Malcolm is like getting into like a sports car because he's like in a hurry to like go talk to. Well, no, he's not going to talk to John Hammond, because in the first book, John Hammond dies. But there's like this whole competition between InGen, which is John Hammond's company, and this other company named BioSyn, which is actually the company that hired Nedry, and the character Dodson in the first movie, who paid Nedry to steal the embryos, is actually from BioSyn, but I don't think they ever tell you that. And then at the beginning of the second movie, we find out that the other dude, I forget his name, has taken over control of InGen from John Hammond because of everything that happened. And there's just a lot more going on behind the scenes, like explaining those characters, and some pretty dry scenes of like board meetings and stuff, but still that makes the story make sense. Okay, here's why InGen is now all of a sudden sending all these helicopters back to the island. Is because John Hammond's not in control anymore. And the second movie eventually gets there, but I think it kind of takes a little while for the audience to understand that, if they even pick up on that.
Yeah. I could be wrong, but I feel like from what I've heard about the second film, haven't gotten to read it yet, or sorry, the second book, apparently Malcolm, the whole reason he wants to go back to the island is to do like an expedition and to work on it. It's not a rescue mission originally. Like, he's actually excited to go back, and his what's the right word? His reputation hasn't been tainted like it had been in the film. And so I don't know if it would have worked if they were to take that Malcolm and put him in the second film, since it seems like this Malcolm, from what I hear in the films, is a bit more cynical about the dinosaurs than the book Malcolm is, from what I've heard. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you'd have to completely change the rest of the story, because I think there's a subplot of some people getting stranded on the Site B island again in the second book. I might be mixing up the two because it's been so long since I've read them. So I think there is still some of that rescue operation going on. But yeah, if you want to have the Malcolm from the books in the second movie, I think the entire story probably has to change.
Yeah, fair. And then you have to change. Yeah, you have to change, unwind, and redo the entire thing, which I don't know. Maybe would have worked. Maybe this is probably the better way to have gone for. Because the problem is, if you're going to show the dry scenes of boardroom meetings and having those kinds of things, you can have a 10-minute, actually not even that, you can have a 5-minute long philosophy discussion about should we make dinosaurs or not. But I don't think that you can have. It's like nobody wants politics in Star Wars. Nobody wants boardroom meetings in Jurassic Park. Yeah.
Well, you posed the question originally, Joe. Do you think the second movie holds up?
I think it does. I think that it is showing some wear on it, and like I think that there's a few places where it's a bit stretched, because the first movie is definitely a thriller monster movie, almost leaning into horror at some points. Like you get the exciting scenes of the herbivores, the grazing, but you also get the terrifying scenes of the T-Rex. But here, I think that the first 2 acts, let's say, of this movie manage that very well. We get very creative kill scenes. We get very creative scenes of the compies following the guy who, like, I can't remember the guy's name, but he electrocuted one of them, or he didn't electrocute, but he shocked one of them with his little taser probe, and it runs off and it gets a bunch of friends and they hunt him down, and then they're just like taking bites out of him. And then he stumbles away, and they go over, take more bites out of him, and he shakes him off. And then that kind of stuff is very well done.
Yeah.
But then we get to the T-Rex in San Diego portion of the movie, And that's where it really falls apart for me, because like there's a point where I think it's Malcolm who said, like, someone asks, how are we going to find it? And I think it's Malcolm who says, follow the screams. And then we have a smash cut directly to some lady sitting in her car screaming in a very Hollywood actory production scream, like obviously fake scream at the T-Rex that's eating people. And it's like, how... Okay, well, now I'm not afraid of these monsters anymore. Now this is like Saturday morning cartoon kind of stuff now.
I think it was just the last. Sorry, you were going to say, Michael?
Oh, is that I feel that same way about the San Diego scene, especially when it eats the dog at the people's house. When it's like they're like, "Where's the first place it's gonna go? Its body needs water," and then they cut to it drinking water, and then they're like, "Then it's gonna look for the next thing it needs," and they cut back and it's eating the dog, and it's like, okay, here we are just explaining everything to you like word for word.
Yeah. Yeah, remember in the first movie when we didn't need to explain basic facts about dinosaurs and we could spend time talking about deeper issues, and now we're just sitting here telling you that it needs to drink water? Man. Yeah, it's and also I think there's a line about how, you know, they put it under and then they were afraid it was going to die, and so they gave it drugs to bring it back to consciousness, and they say it's like a freight train now, and I was expecting to see it like barrel through houses. Like, that's what, like, if you say this dinosaur is like a freight train, I mean, I guess we do see it crash through a warehouse wall, but I don't know, that wasn't nearly as impressive as I thought it would have been. It's like that. I think we all agree that last act, I guess those are like, the first act is kind of them getting to the island and figuring things out. The second act is them trying to escape from the island, and the third act is everything in San Diego. Maybe that third act probably doesn't need to be there, and they could have taken the first 2/3 of the movie and turned that into a full movie instead, and it would have been better for it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with them in the third act, they're just reusing that baby T-Rex plot point that they had already used in Act 2 in the whole trailer scene. So it just felt tacked on and unnecessary. It felt very abrupt too. From once they leave the island, we just immediately switch. Where the heck are Vince Vaughn's, camera guy and Malcolm's daughter? They're just gone. We don't see them at all through that entire third act.
Yep.
So they should have just gone with the original plan, which I believe would have had something to do with the main characters fleeing the island in the helicopter and then battling pterodactyls as they try to escape, which would have worked great. Would have, kept them on the island trying to escape. And it would have made so much more sense than just abruptly cutting to San Diego. And it didn't work, but Spielberg felt the need to give us an out of the blue T-Rex chase scene. So
not that couldn't have maybe worked. Like that, maybe that is your third movie. Maybe something like that where some idiot has brought dinosaurs back to the mainland and now we have to deal with them actually in America. That's your third movie. Maybe that works. I don't even know if you can do it well and not have it be really cheesy and campy and silly.
I mean, maybe you could have set up a part 2, maybe. So, like, they get off the island, and then there's, it's before mid-credit scenes are a thing, but, like, the last 5 or 10 minutes is them on the island, and you see it cuts to the boat, and there are all these dead bodies, and then you see the dinosaur roaring in, the T-Rex roaring in San Diego, and then, that's what the third film's about. Maybe they could have gotten away with that, but still.
No, not in 1997. They couldn't have got away with that, but yes, maybe that would work.
Maybe.
Although even with that, even cutting that out, there are a few portions. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like the trailer going over the cliff scene was probably twice as long as it needed to be. Yeah, and
it was cool, but it was intense and well done, but it was a bit long.
Well, it's also that wasn't as silly as the T-Rex in San Diego, but it did also feel a little bit more silly. Like, we have a lot of in the first movie we get some comical bits with Nedry with the poison spitting dinos, which I can't remember the name of. We get it. There's a little bit of a comical thing, but it's very tense because the movie knows that he's about to die here, right? And so we it feels very tense, even though he has a bit of a comical pratfall thing. But in the carrier going over the cliff, yes, the other guy dies, but none of the people who are in the carrier die, and we know they're not going to die because we know they're all the main characters, and so it feels kind of silly. Because it's so long and it's so many things go wrong there. It feels kind of silly, and that's just these are kind of nitpicking things here in the first half of the movie. But those are things where it's like I said, it mostly holds up, but it has the seams showing in it a little bit because of things like that.
Yeah, that's fair.
See, I personally have more problems with the 15 seconds of Malcolm's daughter doing gymnastics on the dinosaur.
That's fair. That's also fair.
Yep. She has to talk all about how she's trying out for the gymnastics team at the beginning and her dad missed it just so they could pay that off later. And it really didn't even need to happen.
You could have found another way to defeat the velociraptors or escape. I don't know. Yeah, that was a little silly. Although that's another thing is it feels like in the first movie there are a lot more like clever solutions to problems with the dinosaurs, and here there's a lot more like plot armor survival. Like the characters who are the main characters survive because they get lucky. They're crossing velociraptor fields, and everybody gets eaten from the first group of people, and then the characters we care about cross, and I guess they're safe because the velociraptors already ate. So they got lucky. They didn't actually do anything clever to get across. They just got lucky. And then they get lucky in a lot of different positions in that velociraptor fight, as opposed to where, like, like the kids are getting chased by the raptors, and the girl hides in a storage thing where the raptor can see her reflection but not see her, and so it runs into a wall and like dazes itself so she can escape. And they manage to trap one in a refrigerator. It's like those. There's a difference of how they approach things that kind of shows.
Yeah,
I think Bob Ross would call those happy little accidents, Joe.
Sure. All right, we'll allow it. I mean, if Bob Ross would allow it, then I guess we have to allow it.
it's the seal of approval.
Yeah,
That's right.
Bob Ross seal of approval, I guess. All right. Any other thoughts on Lost World, or we want to move on to the real fun part of the evening's discussion?
Want is a strong word, but it sounds like that's where we're going.
Only other thing I would mention with 2 is I like Hammond's brief speech he makes on live TV at the very end, where he finally seems to realize the best thing to do with the dinosaurs is leave them alone. Because this second film was basically his attempt to try and keep a hold on InGen, but once again he realizes, yep, bad idea, and so he's finally like, I'm done. Let's leave them alone. So it feels like it would have been a good place to end this franchise, but here we are, Jurassic Park 3.
Yes.
Jurassic Park 3, 2 park for me. Do we want to just start tearing into it?
If nothing else, the film's short runtime makes it a more bearable watch.
There we go. A positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we know we're in for a rough start when immediately the plane lands and immediately the new big bad. First of all, the T-Rex isn't big and bad enough. We have to throw in the Spinosaurus, right? Mm-hmm. Because T-Rex is stale at this point. We're so used to that. We saw one in San Diego eating dogs and drinking out of the swimming pool. We need a bigger guy where we see immediately the second they land, he's running across the screen, destroying the plane and tearing things up, and they catch the plane on his sail or his claws or something, and it tears the plane up, and it's so much nonsense so fast, where nobody dies in the plane crash. They fly a plane into a tree, and nobody dies in the tree plane crash, but then they get torn apart by the Spinosaurus as it's throwing pieces of plane all over the place. That's kind of sets the tone for the rest of the movie, really.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about comical bits in the second movie. The whole through line of the Spinosaurus eating the satellite phone, and then they hear it ringing in its stomach halfway through while it's chasing them, and then they have to dig through all the piles of dinosaur crap after it poops it out so they can find it and call for their help. Like it very in a world of dinosaurs coming back to life, that to me was the most unrealistic part. Was that phone
Yeah,
would survive that journey.
right. Like that seems like something you would do if you're a ad company that's trying to sell your phone. You would say our phones can go through a Spinosaurus stomach and survive and still work perfectly fine.
Yeah,
Like
I'm pretty sure it wasn't a Nokia, so there's no way.
yeah, it's just uh, I mean that's why dinosaurs were so tough. They had Nokia phones for scales.
Oh,
That's right.
archaeologists discovered that recently, I assume.
Hammond spared no expense. He said that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Oh man. Well, Joe, you just recently watched the third one, I think.
Oh
What are
man,
your impressions?
it feels like it rehashes a lot of it goes through a lot of the same motions that the first two go through. Like the reason that Grant is on the island, he has a line where he delivers a speech talking about the island, and he says there's no force on heaven and earth that could get me back to that island, right? And then immediately we cut to he needs funding again for his research, and that's the way Hammond tricked him onto the island in the first one is I'll fund your research for a further 3 years, right? It's like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's worth it to take a weekend off to go where he doesn't even know where he's going to. He doesn't know what he's getting himself involved in. And now we do the exact same thing, except it's with a less convincing salesman of what Jack Kirby, Paul Kirby. What's the guy's his last name is Kirby. I can't remember his first name. I think
Mr. Kirby.
Yeah, Mr. Kirby. A less convincing salesman who doesn't have the funding, right? He doesn't have the money, so they should have cashed the check and it would have bounced immediately, and he would have been like, okay, well, you're a liar, I'm not doing this. But it's like, okay, oh, this is how we got this character to do the thing last time, so we're just going to do it again. And it's like, okay, so you didn't have a good idea. You didn't know what you were doing. You just wanted to make a third movie. Mm-hmm. And then we get cheesy scenes where Grant is sleeping on the airplane and then he hallucinates a raptor talking to him. Like, what the heck is that?
Yeah, that would make a lot more sense if they had implied that he had some sort of post-traumatic stress from the first experience, but it just kind of comes out of the blue. And then his little sidekick, I think his name is Billy, he's like his intern or something. For some reason, he like insists that Billy is there with him on this island, even though we have no clue how close they are or why they would be that close that he feels he can trust them so much. But I guess they need him there to steal some dinosaur eggs or something. Yeah,
because which I guess I don't even know why. Why would Billy think that's a good idea? Because he would be let's assume that this is a person that Alan knows well enough that he trusts to take with him potentially to Dinosaur Island. If that's the case, Billy should know the velociraptors are not things you mess with, right? Because he would have heard that, like, his boss is the person who is the raptor expert, who would have horror stories of meeting them, talking about how intelligent they were, and his thought is, the super intelligent dinosaurs with the giant 3-inch long claws that can tear your face off without even thinking about it, those are the ones I'm going to steal babies from. That sounds like a good idea. Like, what other than to manufacture tension, right? To create the tension between Billy and Alan, and also to create the tension of the velociraptors are hunting us the entire movie.
It comes back to the whole reason they're there in the first place. They needed money to fund their research. Obviously, the check's not going to work, so let's steal some dinosaur eggs and sell them. That'll, those will go for a high price. We can fund our research that way.
Yeah, it's like, I guess that explanation makes sense, but you're not the smart person to do that. You're not. This isn't the smart way to do that, I should say. Yeah, so there's problems with the plot. It's a rehash. The overarching plot, right, is a rehash of both of the first two movies, right? The second movie is we need to go to this island because someone is stuck there and we need to save them. They're doing that exactly the same thing. And also we have Alan Grant bonding with the kid scenes, even though he doesn't hate kids at this point. So that's at least we understand that in his character arc. he doesn't need to learn to not hate kids anymore.
Mhm.
But still, we have scenes where he's bonding with a kid, and this time he likes the kid from the beginning because the kid knows stuff about dinosaurs and it was able to survive by himself for 2 months on the island. So, yay, progress, I guess.
I mean, yeah, so many scenes and ideas of this film were just retreading and then reusing original stuff from the first and second film. Even the core of this film is a rescue mission off of Isla Sorna. That was the last film.
Yep.
And the Lucky Pack. That was the last film.
Oh yeah, I mean they even kept that motif. Yep. Oh man.
Did anyone else notice the camera battery plot hole?
Camera battery.
So like when they're trying to look at the video camera and the guy pulls out his flashlight to get batteries out of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So when they need the batteries for the camera, the pilot guy, he pulls out his flashlight batteries. Looking at the size of it is very likely a D-cell battery flashlight.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way that camera runs on D-cell batteries.
Yeah, fair.
Video cameras like that either run on a rechargeable battery pack or AA's. There is no way you can fit a D-cell in there. Not going to happen.
No. Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but that's just a little attention to detail thing. Why did they even need to do that? Why couldn't they just say the camera was working? Oh, yeah. Well. You added an unnecessary detail that made the movie worse. Why? I mean, now we're going off into the weeds about random little problems because the bigger problem is the first two movies were based on books, and both of those books were telling coherent stories, right? You know, Crichton had an idea for a story, and he had an idea for two different stories, and that fit together where they needed to be in one universe, in this Jurassic Park universe.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to make film adaptations of those two stories. But by the time we get to 3, it's very obvious that it's not that someone had an idea for a story and they're like, wow, this story is so amazing. We have so much of a good story that it's worth adding it on to this franchise and turning a duology into a trilogy. It's very obvious that they said, wow, we made millions and millions of dollars off of this franchise. Can we get a little bit more money out of it? And what is the bare minimum of story quality that we need to slap together half-heartedly in order to get as much money as we can out of this project?
Mm-hmm.
Which...
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Joe Johnston, the director, because I don't know how much he did with the writing, but he has directed some very good films. I feel like most of the problems with it, I'd assume, had to do with the writing, because this guy directed the first Captain America film. He directed The Rocketeer. October Sky was another great one. But yeah, just this one is not a highlight of his career.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree it's probably a writing issue. I would be willing to say it's more a problem of the writing than it is a problem of... Because, like, what we do see, although I would say even the scenes with the dinosaurs aren't as impressive. Like, somehow we're 8 years later and it's less impressive at least in some of the scenes.
Yeah.
I think the velociraptors are very well done. I think the Spinosaurus is not as well done as the T-Rex.
I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that by this time they were using CGI more and more and less practical effects more and more. And that's really what did it, would be my thought.
Could be it. Could be. I would believe it.
It's a minor thing, but I thought it was nice to bring Laura Dern back briefly as Ellie and get to see her and Al interact. But I was not a fan of them breaking up Ellie and Alan, since it was pretty clear from the first film that they were a thing.
Yeah,
it was just kind of a downer.
I mean, yes, that's fair. That's although I guess it kind of makes sense because they did kind of hint at maybe they wanted different things. Like she talked about wanting kids, and he learned to tolerate kids, but I don't think that I think it was clear that Grant did not want kids for himself. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah,
But
see, my whole thought with the first film, just going back to that briefly, was at the beginning of the film, he didn't want kids, and so that was the whole. Uh, I don't know if stalemate's the right word, but they were at an impasse because they weren't really able to move forward if they couldn't agree on that, because that was a big thing for her, not a big thing for him. And so throughout the film, he's slowly starting to get closer to kids, but he's also seeing Malcolm as sort of a bit of a rival because he's flirting with Ellie, and he even has a talk. Malcolm even has a talk with Alan, and Alan asks him about kids, and Malcolm says he's had kids before, and so that's sort of Alan realizing that there are other people who can offer what Alan can't, and that on top of him, actually learning to find that he does like kids. I feel like by the end of the film, they had finally reconciled that and should have been able to move on and actually, get married or whatever. Was my thought.
So is that the fix? If we have Jurassic Park 3 and we have Grant and Sadler married, that fixes all the problems?
That fixes all the problems.
Oh, wow.
Including the thing with the batteries and the flashlight.
Yep.
Yeah. It just
100%.
Thanos Stap magically fixes everything.
Speaking of the batteries again, I don't know if this would be considered a plot hole, because I guess you could explain it away. But in the second movie, when they're planning the rescue, they talk about how the larger dinosaurs tend to stick to the outer rim of the island, so it should be relatively safe on the interior. Then you get to the third movie, and when they find the kid, he asks Alan Grant, like, why are they going towards the ocean? Like, all of the big dinosaurs are out there. So it's a kind of a cool connection between the two movies that I guess the habits of where the dinosaurs nest down stays relatively consistent.
Yeah. Although you say that, but then they're in the middle of the island and they're getting attacked by carnivores anyway. So
yeah, that's also true.
It's like
the dinosaurs are wherever they need to be.
Yeah, the dinosaurs are in a quantum state where they spontaneously appear wherever they're needed for the plot. They aren't actually living animals, which is technically true from a movie making standpoint, but you don't want to have that be the case in the movie. So
I have a question for the both of you. It's more about 3, but it can be asked for either 2 or 3, because I find it interesting that they wouldn't bother going back to Isla Nebula in either 2 or 3, because that's where Jurassic Park is. I appreciate that we didn't go back in the second one, as this gave us a new location, and I felt like it made for a good reason to have the sequel. But you'd think they'd go back in 3 if for no other reason than because I'm pretty sure the first film did better at the box office than the second one. So you'd think from a money standpoint, maybe they would have done it. But I don't know. The only reason I can think of is they didn't do it was maybe the park set was more expensive to work with. So, and they were already spending a lot of money on effects. That's the only thing I can think of, but wasn't sure if you guys had a thought.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
The only other thing I could think of would be maybe, since they've already introduced the concept of we breed the dinosaurs over here, then ship them over here, maybe people will be confused, well, how are there still dinosaurs on the main island? But we've also already established that they can change sex and have babies, so it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Why they couldn't go back, because there would very likely still be a healthy population of dinosaurs on that island.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't say, because I think canonically in both book and movie universe, that's actually a chain of 5 islands. Like there's a group of 5 islands, and like one of them is Jurassic Park, and one of them is Site B, and then there are 3 other islands that just happen to be nearby. I'm surprised they didn't say, oh, well, actually, this is on Site C on the 3rd island, where they have even bigger, more terrifying dinosaurs. Like that seems like I almost want to give points back to the movie for not doing that, for not being that terrible. Congratulations, you were scraping the bottom of the barrel, but you didn't tear up the bottom of the barrel and get get splinters on your fingernails.
Right.
Yeah, you knew right where to stop. All right. Well, we have anything else? I do want to say, I don't know if they were planning to set this up. There is an interesting setup of, like, we get the velociraptors are kind of getting progressively more intelligent, at least in their on-screen depiction. Maybe they're supposed to have been this intelligent the entire time, but like we're seeing them do more and more intelligent things. Like we see them a little bit of strategizing in the first movie. We see them like absolutely tearing apart people in systematic fashion in the second movie. And then in the third movie, we see like they're so smart that they can be reasoned with on giving them their eggs in exchange for being allowed to live. Right. So we see this progression of them getting more and more intelligent, which is moving into. I have not seen the second of the Jurassic World movies, but I know in the first one, like we have velociraptors as like trained attack dogs, basically, where Chris Pratt can get on his motorcycle and drive around with them following him, attacking on command. Like, so we do see that progression. I don't know if that was intentional or if that was just like accidental escalation. I don't know if I should give the movie credit for that or not.
I feel like you can give it at least half credit because the Raptors are a pretty strong through line through the first three films. And I think with Jurassic World, they were obviously trying to pick back up on that because the Raptors were just a major character, especially in the first two films. In terms of them being able to be trained that way, I don't know if that is necessarily believable, but I would give the new films at least a little credit for maintaining that.
Yeah. And as far as them getting more and more intelligent, we should be able to tell with this film if by the end of it, one of the raptors walks up and says Alan, and it's not in a dream, then we know we've made it. Peak intelligence right there.
Yeah. You mean if at the ends of Jurassic World, what, Dominion or whatever this third one is called, if one of the raptors comes up and talks to, because I am I correct that they got the actor to come back for a cameo, who plays Alan Grant, to come back for
they got all three of them come back, and it's not cameos. Like they actually have decent roles from what I hear.
Okay.
Yeah, they're part of the main cast.
Okay, cool. So yeah, if they get him to come back, if he interacts with a velociraptor and it just straight up talks to him, then we'll know they've completed the cycle.
Exactly.
And they're ready to usurp us.
That's been the real story all along, is velociraptors learning how to speak English.
That's right.
Yeah. The actual story is about us creating our own replacements, but not baby humans and not robots, velociraptors. All right. I don't think that we can top that. I don't think that we can go any better than that. So we have any other final thoughts, or we want to move into our number ratings?
I think I'm pretty tapped out.
All right. So where would you guys do? I think we do out of 10 stars, or you can just say an out of 10 number for all three. We'll start with our guest.
Oh, sure. I have to give the first one 10 out of 10. That's my favorite movie of all time, and it changed, filmmaking forever. So I give it a 10 out of 10. Lost World, probably give it a healthy 7 out of 10. It's passable. Not as strong of an offering as the first one. Jurassic Park 3, I'll give it a 3. It is exactly what it says it is. 3 out of 10. Might be entertaining for your kids to watch some dinosaurs gnash on some people, but an unnecessary creation, in my opinion.
Yep, pretty similar. I would also give the first a 10. Excellent film. Perfect in every way. Second film should have been an 8 if we didn't have those last 20 minutes, but since that is how the film ends, it's better. It's closer to a 7 for me. And then 3, because of despite all its flaws, since it has a short length, and we still at least get Sam Neill being Alan Grant, who is a very entertaining character, I'll give it, at least for now, a 5.
Wow, very generous. I'll say, yeah, Jurassic Park, the first one, excellent movie. Maybe the perfect modern monster movie. At least I don't know of a better one. I don't know of a better modern monster movie that's ever been made. So until that day comes, Jurassic Park is our 10 out of 10. And I agree that if we didn't have the San Diego scene, 2 would probably be an 8. As it stands, we have to drop it down to a 7. And then I'll split the difference between you guys. I'll give 3 a 4 out of 10. It's not really worth watching, but if you want something to have in the background while you're eating popcorn, that's fine. You could do that, and it probably won't make you hate yourself for it.
Depends on how many times you have to watch it.
That's yeah. If you're trapped in an isolation chamber and the only thing you're allowed to watch is Jurassic Park 3,
nope,
not worth it.
It probably would be better to just go crazy. All right. Well, on that happy note, I think that is all we've got for you guys. So, as always, thank you for listening. If you have been listening, thank you. And if not, hey, you didn't miss very much. We have been Background Noise, and until next time, bye.